Hello and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Stephen Cole, and on this edition, we're examining the world of the entrepreneur. What drives them? How do they get started? And how do you become one? We'll find out why life in a pandemic lockdown could fuel a brand new wave of global entrepreneurs. Plus, do the world's governments do enough to encourage innovation? And are entrepreneurs born, or are they made? Can you teach yourself to become a billionaire? Entrepreneurship is on the rise. Around 400 million people worldwide, or 1 in 18 people, currently own their own business. And if we look at the latest list of the world's richest people, entrepreneurs dominate. At number 1, worth $188.5 billion, is Tesla and SpaceX boss Elon Musk, whose career began when he and his brother launched a company which provided online city guides for newspapers in the 1990s. The man he overtook, soon-to-be former CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, is now worth $187 billion, a sum he almost certainly couldn't have imagined when he set up an online bookstore from his garage in 1994, an idea that came to him on a road trip across the United States earlier that year. And in third place is Bill Gates, at $113 billion, who dropped out of his studies at Harvard to pursue his Microsoft dreams. And yet analysis from the organization Approved Index shows that it's in the developing world where entrepreneurism is really thriving. The 3 most entrepreneurial countries in the world are Uganda, where 28.1% of the population own their own business, Thailand, 16.7%, and Brazil, 13.8%. Why? Well, in developing countries, self-sufficiency and business ownership are often the only way to make money. And that could be a trend which is only enhanced by the COVID-19 pandemic. Many experts think it'll fuel the next wave of entrepreneurial innovation. They point to the meteoric rise of online retailer Alibaba in the wake of the SARS crisis and the growth of Uber and Airbnb following the financial crash in 2008. And with hundreds of millions of people stuck at home in lockdown, many unable to continue to work, there's never been a better time for the truly entrepreneurial to focus on that business idea. But before you get too excited, convinced perhaps that your latest idea will catapult you to Elon Musk-style billions, remember that the average salary of an entrepreneur is just $50,000 a year. They work an average of 66 hours per week, compared to 47 for the average worker, and 90% of all startups fail. So what effect has the pandemic really had on the world of the entrepreneur? One man who can shed light on that is Dan Vahdat, founder and CEO of Huma, a global health tech AI company. Dan, tell us how you became an entrepreneur.
I really didn't know what entrepreneurship really means when I was, growing up. But I like to build things, and I like to bring people together to build things together because it's like really joyful. And if you do something that can have impact as a result of your project, it is a very happy moment. That kind of was the seed and the foundation of how I got into the path of entrepreneurship.
And how important are entrepreneurs to a national economy, do you think? What's the contribution they make?
I believe if a national economy is a tree, entrepreneurs of any level, from the 2 people that they run a coffee shop to entrepreneurs that they're running multinational companies and in different industries, they are the roots of this tree. I think they're the most essential part of creating jobs, pushing the boundaries, inventing, creating a culture of commitments to the good quality, good work, embracing opportunities, educating individuals and their team members so they all grow and ultimately become better for their loved ones and also for the society. I think it's absolutely essential.
Do you think governments do enough to encourage entrepreneurism?
I do believe, based on my experience in the UK, they put some really interesting scheme for entrepreneurs to at least have an easier way to get initial money they need, to get started from the tax benefits and so on for the investors. I believe if entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs are the root of economy, the more you nurture them, the more invest in them, the better environment you create for them, it's just even better. So nothing is enough, but there are some really good initiatives at the moment going since many years.
And according to the latest statistics, London is the favorite destination for biotech startups because it encourages people like yourself. Tell us a bit more about your company and what's been happening, I suppose, during the current pandemic.
Huma started with this vision of how can we bring proactive, predictive care to everyone's in a way that is democratized, in a way that ultimately you empower individuals with different diseases to live their life as normal as it can get, and ultimately spend even longer time with their loved ones. So that was kind of the mission and the idea behind Huma. And for us to do that, if you're sick, one of the interactions you do the most for certain diseases is going to the hospitals in an old world. But in a new world, what if we can bring the hospitals to your home through technologies like mobile phones, connected devices? We as Huma, we are integrated to 400 different devices, and we can collect all the essentials data that potentially is needed to manage a certain disease. Devices that they don't cost much, applications that they don't cost much, all in the comfort of your home. And then all those data goes to the clinical team. Clinical team, they have a real-time overview of what's happening to you, and they only intervene when they see something is going wrong.
I mean, this is a fairly cynical question, Dan, but has the pandemic contributed to the development of your technology?
I think pandemic opened an opportunity and made it even clearer how important it is to be able to move hospitals and delivery of care as much as possible to people's home for two core reasons. Number one, because suddenly the number of patients increased, so the hospitals didn't even have the capacity. Through technology like us and some of the national projects that we have launched, we can almost double the hospital's capacity. And number two is, as you know, COVID, when it happened, is one of those diseases that forced everyone that has COVID to quarantine, but also other patients that they are high risk with other diseases, they had to also stay put because if they would get COVID, complications could happen. So in a sense, it made it super clear how important the technology is. And also it enabled us to bring the kind of impact as a company we always dreamt for. For us, the idea of launching a national deals and initiatives and projects across some of the largest economies in the world was unimaginable, at least in such a short time frame.
And Dan, lastly, what advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur, whether he or she is at school, college, university, or their first job? What advice would you give to them?
Well, to be honest, I don't see myself in a position really to give advice to anybody. We are still, learning, growing ourselves as we are building the business. Having said that, maybe the only things that I think it matters at the end of the day to keep people's running, their love and connections to the cause they're committing themselves, because any projects, any company is going to take longer. There's so many hardships that you have to endure to be able to move one step after the next. And if you really don't love what you do, and what you do it for the right reasons, and money is not the one for sure, then you will give up probably, or the journey would be miserable no matter the success at the end. And you don't want that. I think the commitments to the cause, it is the most essential things, and then really working hard after that.
Dan Vahdat, that's a brilliant answer. Thank you very much for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you very much.
With me now is Deborah Meaden, a businesswoman and one of the dragons on the British television show Dragon's Den, where she looks to invest in the next generation of entrepreneurs. Deborah, what was your first foray into the world of entrepreneurism?
Very, very early. I can remember when I was about 7, picking some flowers from the garden and setting up a little flower stall and realizing that it was on the side of the road. It was actually on a sort of the little entrance to the house. Realizing cars had gone past before they saw us, so I sort of picked the stall up and moved it into my neighbour's garden, because that way the cars could see them, getting into terrible trouble from the neighbour. But I always wanted to be in business. You know, it was just, I don't remember the first time. I always knew I wanted my own business.
Is that, do you think, a common trait of the entrepreneur? They don't learn it. They don't want to be. It's in their DNA.
I mean, there are things you can definitely learn. You know, I learn every day, and that's true. I'm not just saying I do learn every day. That's key to being an entrepreneur. But I do see some quite common characteristics. You know, we might look different, we might speak differently, we might have different backgrounds, but there are definitely some common characteristics, I think, amongst entrepreneurs.
You are an investor on the hugely popular British television show Dragon's Den. What in particular are you looking for from the people who are pitching their products to you?
Fundamentally, I'm looking for people with good judgment. They've got a good nose for it. That's what entrepreneurs have. They've got a good nose for it. They've got a really clear vision on what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And I've got to trust them. You know, I've seen some fantastic businesses, but I haven't trusted those people. That's trust in terms of, are we going to be able to work well together? But it's also trust in terms of, are they going to understand and be able to relay the picture about their business to me? So trust is a really big thing for me.
Okay, so trust, but then how do you know? Does the light go on when you see a good business idea?
Absolutely. I mean, actually, two things happen. Sometimes something comes into the den and you think, oh, that's amazing. And I get excited. I can feel that excitement. And then as we unpick it, I think, oh, that's not going to work. And sometimes things come into the den where you think, no, I'm never going to invest in that. I mean, I invested in some towels, for goodness sake. I mean, that wasn't a new invention. But the entrepreneurs were fantastic. They presented their business in a different way. They explained why these particular towels were going to really take the market. You know, so and there is definitely that moment where you think, oh, I had no idea I was going to invest in that business, but wow, that's fantastic.
Now, let's talk about the B word and the C word, the B word being Brexit and the C word being COVID. Have they, or will they, have an impact on startups?
Yes, definitely. Because what I always say with business is that, you know, even the best business in the world has the right time. You know, timing is everything. So you've got to question yourself in this environment. You know, at this moment, is this the right moment to launch this? And the answer might well be yes. It might be that it actually can take advantage of the current situation. But the answer might be actually no, things need to settle down a little bit. I can see that this is a business, but I probably need to do all the planning now and we'll actually launch it, you know, the other side of the B and the C word.
And what advice do you give to entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs who failed, or the best way for them to handle adversity or risk?
I can only talk about the way I handle it, which has set me in very good stead. I don't like the feeling of failure, but I don't live in the feeling of failure. If you live in the feeling of failure, you get scared about doing it again. You know, I beat myself up for about 30 seconds and then I think to myself, right, now what am I going to do about this? And that's the best thing to do. There's no point running things over and over. There's a point in running things over and learning from it, but not over and over and over, because all that does is chips away at your confidence. And being confident is a really, really important part of being a successful entrepreneur.
Deborah Meaden, thanks very much for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Still to come here on The Agenda, what makes an entrepreneur? We'll be considering the character traits you really need to succeed. Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for the Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the agenda. Entrepreneurs have, of course, always been an object of fascination for the more risk-averse amongst us. Scott OMalley, who describes himself as an underachieving entrepreneur, is editor-in-chief of the magazine Inc., which is designed to inspire current and future entrepreneurs and to give some insight into just what makes them tick. And he joins me now from New York. You describe yourself as an underachieving entrepreneur, but how would you describe an entrepreneur?
You know, I think an entrepreneur is someone who's willing to take risk in advance of an idea. That can be in a lot of different scenarios, right? That can be someone who's working out on their own in our traditional sense of entrepreneurship, but it also can be someone within a company who's trying to advance an idea or change or steer that ship in a different direction. But the key is someone with an idea who's willing to put something on the line to achieve it and believe at the other side there's a payoff for an audience, for themselves, for their team.
You must have met a tremendous number of entrepreneurs through working at Inc. Do they share the same traits, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. All a little bit crazy, but in the right way. I think what that means is that, you know, they all have an idea. They all believe wholly in their idea. They're clever and resourceful in how to bring that idea to light. And they don't take no very easily. I think that's a really important thing, that they're willing to face lots of challenges, willing to see lots of doors slammed in their face and still move forward. That is really the set of characteristics that I see across the board.
Are entrepreneurs typically difficult to manage?
So I would say that, you know, there are those people who are comfortable in an organization and those people who need to go out on their own. And they can be both. You can have an entrepreneur in a big organization, someone who's idea driven, but has larger team goals in mind always. And then you can have someone who just has to do it themselves, who can't not be the boss. And I think both of those kinds of people are really valuable.
Being an entrepreneur comes with a lot of challenges and also often with a degree of risk as well. How do you learn to cope with the challenges and the risk?
I think there's no question that you have to be someone who's comfortable with risk. We see that people in the United States anyway, who are entrepreneurs tend to be younger or tend to be older, which means that middle part where you have a lot of other obligations, where you're raising a family, where you're paying a mortgage on a house or something like that, gets in the way of entrepreneurship. That level of risk is not tolerable for a lot of people. So right out of college, you have opportunity. Once you've gotten to the other side of your career, you have opportunity again, right? So I think there are some fundamental risks in the way we live that prevent a lot of people from being entrepreneurs. But ultimately, what you have to decide is that you are in charge of your destiny as an entrepreneur, and that whatever challenges are put to you, you are savvy enough, you're clever enough that you can overcome them or dance around them or make them irrelevant to you. You minimize the risk through the way you think.
Is the key for an entrepreneur just one piece of advice, and that is to recognize the idea that will work? Is that all an entrepreneur needs to do? That's the basis qualification.
So, you know, it's hard to say, right? Because the best
well, if you don't recognize that brilliant idea, if the light bulb doesn't go on, then you're not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, what I would say is you can have the light bulb moment a lot, and the real test of it is whether it lights up the eyes of other people, right? Is there really a market for it? Because there are lots of ideas, lots of solutions, not all of them work. Some of them come down to timing, right? It's just that the infrastructure isn't right for your idea. And if you were there 5 years later, you would have been successful. So there are lots of complications, and it's why you can say, I had that idea, and maybe you didn't pursue it. Maybe the market wasn't right for it. There are a lot of factors going into the magic. It's lightning in a bottle ultimately when you have one of those really successful businesses. It's
not enough to have the right idea, it's having the right idea at the right time. Is that the single piece of advice you give to entrepreneurs?
I think that's really incredibly important, is to ask yourself, is the infrastructure to support my idea in place? Is the consumer of the mind to take advantage of my idea right now? Are investors interested in solving this problem? So the timing of it is absolutely crucial.
Scott OMalley, many thanks to you for joining us on The Agenda.
My pleasure, Stephen.
So we've heard from a number of entrepreneurs about how they got their big breaks, but can you be taught to be an entrepreneur? Or is it something you're born with? Well, joining me now is Dr. Shahina Danjuja-Jivraj, Associate Professor in Entrepreneurial Leadership at Henley Business School. How would you define an entrepreneur?
I see it as someone who brings about change through innovation without knowing all the outcomes. So there is a great deal of uncertainty there, but they're willing to bear calculated risks. And when I talk about entrepreneurship, I'm not just talking about business startup. I'm also talking about people who bring change in society and also within organizations. And particularly now in 2021, we're seeing an even greater need for entrepreneurial leadership across all types of organizations and across our society. So entrepreneurship's not static, and it's not a lifelong title either. You can be entrepreneurial at certain points in time. And for example, if you have set up a business, once that business keeps running and you're not engaging in innovation, then in my mind, you actually move into the role of being a business owner or a manager.
Do entrepreneurs tend to share the same characteristics?
Looking at this notion of entrepreneurial leadership, we're seeing these characteristics being spread across leadership, but I think entrepreneurs are much more nuanced in these specific characteristics that I'll share with you. So my big one is actually about creativity, individuals who see the world, but through different perspectives, and actually then having the confidence to act on it. I think another really key component of being entrepreneurial is resilience and grit. Again, we've had a lot about these words, particularly during the pandemic. Another way of looking at it, you could argue that entrepreneurs are stubborn. But
they tend to be, don't they? Because stubbornness is part of leadership. Or conviction of your own rightness, put it that way.
I think so, but I think that the shift there that we are starting to see in this new trend of entrepreneurship is also about being collaborative. So having conviction in your thinking and your vision, really important, because you're going to have to get people onto the journey with you. But at the same time, being open enough to listen to new ideas. And we're really seeing this new wave of collaborative entrepreneurship, which wasn't there 10 or 15 years ago. So it's that delicate balance between knowing where you want to get to, but listening to others.
And I mean, basically, you're at Henley Business School, and I talked about individuals, stubbornness, leadership. Can you teach all of those to people coming to Henley Business School, or are entrepreneurs already made before they come to you?
So I think there's been a lot of academic research, as you can imagine, in this space over the last 30 years, trying to understand whether entrepreneurs are born or bred. Now, working and teaching within a business school and teaching entrepreneurship, of course, I would say the behaviors are taught. But I think we're starting to see more and more research, especially in terms of behavior, in terms of neuroscience, that shows us that the characteristics I've just shared with you, creativity, these are all skills that can be taught and nurtured. And we know that they can, the social context within which you're born and you grow can actually have a huge impact on learning and fine-tuning these skills. So we think much more about entrepreneurship in terms of behaviors rather than traits. We also, but at the same time, we also know that individuals who are born into family business backgrounds or into entrepreneurial cultures are much more exposed to the language and the behavior from a younger age. So there are advantages if you're born within these environments, but it is certainly, there are characteristics that can be learned over time.
Are we good in the UK at producing entrepreneurs compared with other countries in Europe?
we've got some really good areas within the UK and good sectors that we're focusing on, particularly if you look at innovation hubs, if you look at areas around food innovation, for example, and tech. I think what we're starting to see actually is much more cross-European and even global collaboration. So entrepreneurs are not necessarily seeing themselves located in one particular space, but being able to work across different regions.
Does that mean the internet has made it easier for entrepreneurs to collaborate or pursue their ideas or ambitions?
I think it has, certainly. I think it's leveled the playing field. You know, the focus isn't so much on, especially during the COVID situation, you don't have to worry about the premises, the bright, shiny offices. It's really focusing on the product or the service that you're delivering, and convenience is one of those biggest factors that we know is underpinning a lot of businesses. But at the same time, there's also much greater transparency. So thinking about the way in which you're developing the business, the DNA within the business, how you operate, your reputation, all of that is also much more transparent on the internet.
Finally, I'm thinking there is no time in my memory anyway when we've needed entrepreneurs as much as we do now, with so many faltering economies, not just in the UK but across Europe. They really are badly needed, aren't they?
Absolutely. And this comes back to this idea about being an entrepreneurial leader. We will not go back to business as usual. And we have to shift our thinking away from talking about the new normal to actually talking about the next normal, because the shock we've experienced as a result of the pandemic, there will be further waves of change. So being entrepreneurial, having that mindset is absolutely crucial. But the other piece that's really important here, whether you're setting up a business or whether you're setting up a level of activism or change within your company, being really clear about your drivers and how these feed into your operation and your organization. And actually becoming really comfortable with uncertainty is a huge piece of surviving and actually thriving in this environment.
Dr. Shahina, thank you very much for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you, Stephen.
It was Jean-Baptiste Say, a French economist, who first coined the word entrepreneur in about 1800. He said, the entrepreneur shifts economic resources out of an area of lower and into an area of higher productivity and greater yield. And that's why entrepreneurs are in such demand during downturns. Entrepreneurs are people who find ways around business difficulties. They persevere with a business plan at times when others run for the shelter of full-time employment. And, as we've heard, never is that more vital for the global economy than in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic. Until recently, there was a general feeling that entrepreneurs were born, not made. The skills they required were, it was thought, either learned at the dinner table when young, or they were instinctive, a sort of seat of the pants thing. But again, many are predicting the current COVID restrictions are exactly the right breeding ground to teach a whole new generation of entrepreneurs. Innovations not only break the mold, they also yield far better returns than ordinary business ventures. One study found that the overall rate of return for some 17 successful innovations made in the 1970s averaged 56%. Compare that with the 16% average return on investment for all American businesses over the past 30 years. And just to end where I began, on a French note, Victor Hugo once remarked, "You can resist an invading army, you can't resist an idea whose time has come." Today, entrepreneurship is just such an idea. Don't forget, you can watch everything from past Agenda episodes and find additional exclusive content on our website, cgtn.com/Europe, or on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @CGTN Europe. Coming up on a future Agenda, where to invest. We'll look into where you should be putting your money in readiness for a post-pandemic world. But for now, from me, Stephen Cole, and all the Agenda team here in London, it's goodbye.